lucky to have somebody with as much experience raising up not just a startup, but quite a scale. So we're very fortunate to have you. I'm not really sure what makes me qualified to be up here, but I appreciate folks like David cheering me on, and I think that's maybe one of the most important lessons that I could feel comfortable stepping down right now, is surround yourself with people who make you feel stupid. Okay, that's the best. Rewinding 7 years, when I was actually the CEO of a Trendlines company, so I have a warm place in my heart for Trendlines. It was David who actually was one of my mentors, and he was very harsh on me in a very good way, and I think he was right. So let's take a look here. So first we have to ask a question. What's this report? Just a quick background. Imagine Bio is a small consulting company we founded about 5 years ago, totally focused on the healthcare space and very much the digital space. There's a link here, and we'll put it up again at the end for anybody who wants to take a look. It's a very long report, but we synthesize it down to about 11 pages for the exact summary, and you guys are all welcome to it. I very much appreciate your constructive feedback and criticism as well. This is a little bit about our team. As I mentioned, I try to surround myself with people who do definitely make me feel very stupid, and MDs, MBAs, JDs. So I'm the shallow diet guy. I just try to keep everybody working together. Question with digital health is, with digital health, can we point to any successful digital health company? And I'm not talking about Israel. What is a major global digital health player? Can anybody name one?
Metadata solutions.
Metadata solutions. So their cap must be like $10 billion or something?
5.8. They were acquired for 5.8.
5.8. So there clearly are data companies, electronic healthcare data companies, right, that are in that league. And there are many. But in terms of digital health, I would beg the question that there really is not one yet. So what is this digital health space? And the answer is that digital health really is the application of digital to all of the existing verticals, at least as of today. So there's pharma, there's medical device, there's healthcare IT, right? And there's healthcare providers and payers. These are the traditional vertical players in the healthcare market. And they know how to do their business. They know how to sell drugs really well, develop them decently well. Same thing with devices, providing care, they know how to do that. But when it comes to using digital technologies and making money, does anybody know how to do that? So the question is, who's made the most money out of all the players in digital health? Anyone know who's made the most money?
How do you find a digital health company? Because there are many digital health companies.
There are tremendously many digital health companies. What I'm talking about is a major global digital health player. For that, we actually don't have any. So when everybody in this room looks for partners, who are you speaking with? You're speaking with hospitals. You're speaking with healthcare IT companies. That's probably the closest thing to digital health company. You're speaking with pharma, right, and payers. We'll come back to it though. If you'll hold your question, we'll come back to it. So the biggest player who's actually made money in this space might surprise you. It's United Healthcare. It's a payer. It's a payer who's utilized the technology, utilized the data, and if you look at them over the last 7 years, actually their market cap is up about 500 times. And they're not a small company to begin with. So that's talking about an existing healthcare player utilizing data very, very effectively. So this is a graph probably we're very familiar with, not just at the explosive growth of healthcare costs in America, this is America specifically, but specifically about healthcare administrators being such an unfortunately aggressive part of the growth of costs in the system. So when we look at the technologies that hopefully are under development in this room and certainly in the Israeli ecosystem, one may naturally worry if they're a doctor, hey, are they trying to displace me? And the answer is no. It should be no, at least. Because most of the waste in the system is not the doctors, it's not the nurses. It is the administrators. Now, many of our families and cousins and aunts, maybe those administrators, nothing against them personally, but clearly they're not the ones providing value. They're not the ones that you want to see when you come to the doctor's office. And so there's obviously a push going on here that's affecting all of the current stakeholders. And the reason I asked my first question there in terms of who is a digital health company, and if we can, maybe we can define digital health very broadly, which is anybody who's using data to provide healthcare more efficiently and more effectively. I think that's a very broad definition, right? So if we use that, using data to provide healthcare more efficiently and more effectively. And there we see all of the regular stakeholders now being pushed, especially in the US, really this is a global trend, into having to defend their current costs. And if this was a fear 5 years ago, today it's absolutely true. If you're a healthcare provider in the US today, over a quarter, if not over a third in most cases, of your revenues are at risk, as it's said. It's being paid based on delivering value that you can stand for. As a healthcare provider today in the US, that's the reality already. The other verticals, so far, are trying to stay in the shadows, but not for long. Everybody knows, whether they're pharma or medical device, et cetera, they know that they're going to have to defend the value that they play in the ecosystem. I have to give one of my clients actually credit for this. So our clients tend to be large pharma companies, medical device companies, healthcare players from all over the world who see and have heard of and want to get more involved in partnering with folks like you in the room. And it's obviously more than just coming and meeting a few and saying, hey, okay, fine, we'll invest in one of you and we'll partner with another one. There's more of a process here. And specifically around business models, which is the question that we're dealing with here in the room. Really, even though superficially our job is often scouting, looking for opportunities that meet their needs, really the value add that we really try to help on both sides of the table is helping them understand where they can really have a win-win relationship and work together. So one of our clients says, fine, so Israel's like really well known, right? But where does it actually compare versus the other digital health hubs? And none of these numbers are our own. Startup Nation Central for Israel, Startup Health for almost all the others, and Digital Garage for Japan. These are the top 10 hubs globally. Now, we know from other ecosystems, from other little subsectors, Israel is explosively amazing when it comes to per capita. But these numbers were a wow for me, because nobody had mentioned them to me until I saw them for the first time last year, which is, by deal count, we're number 2, only behind the US. And by total funding, real numbers, not per capita, not per company, real numbers, we were number 3, only behind the US and China. And this is for 2018, and it was also true in 2017. So if you're wondering, well, where do we fall in on what is absolutely a global trend? Nothing I mentioned yet is Israel specific, other than the fact there's a lot of money floating in the ecosystem here. So obviously, within an hour drive, within an hour radius of Tel Aviv, that's basically all this trends. But we're really not focused that much on the investment piece as we are on the partnering and on the development. So take a look here on the right. You see the roughly 500 companies that are in some way, shape, or form digital health. I've highlighted in 2 in black there. So one are companies that are already released with a product. Doesn't mean they're charging for it, but they have something that's available that you can download, that you can use, that's either approved or doesn't need to be approved. And in yellow, a company that are already doing pilots. Now, pilots is a term that we can define in many different ways depending on who you are. But these are companies who have technologies, frankly, that at least work according to somebody, right? They do something. That's pretty cool. Because if we look at where this ecosystem has come from 5-6 years ago when my colleague Dan Schiebel helped launch Digital Health IL, at that first conference when he was still at EY, there was 60 digital health companies. So fast forward now, 6-7 years, 500 plus companies, but not just companies. There's a lot, you can have a company just by name. There's over 250 companies that have products out there in the market. That's pretty amazing. What that also means is when it comes to global companies who are absolutely becoming more and more active, if they were active before, they're active more now. If they weren't yet active, we're starting to see more and more players. So just in the last year, we're starting to see more healthcare providers, which frankly, I would hope that most of the startups in the room, these are probably the ones you want to be partnering with, proving your economics, proving your clinical value, proving your business model, and hopefully they will actually buy your products and scale with you, not just get paid for clinical trials, right? And this is amazing. This is one of the type of players that's really not been active in Israel, except for, we've had the Cleveland Clinics a little bit, the Johns Hopkins a little bit. There's probably been 5-10 who have been active historically, like in the medical device land, pharma land. That's quickly increasing. And then, as many of you have hopefully heard, Anthem, this is not confidential, Anthem just launched an R&D center. A US insurer launching in Israel? What's going on here? So obviously, you've all seen and you're all a part of the wonderful ecosystem we have here. This just kind of points out that everybody needs to be working together. Hopefully you are all part of that ecosystem. You're not just showing up to events like these, but you're using that Israeli chutzpah of reaching out to a CEO of a much more experienced company, reaching out to a David, reaching out to a Gali who's got a lot more experience and saying, hey, give me an hour of your time, please. Probably not going to pay for it, but please give me an hour of your time and give me some good advice, right? And that's really what makes a lot of the startups, a lot of the thinking here so creative and advanced. And there's a lot of top institutions involved in a day-to-day basis here. So beyond the startups, we have to understand what are the parts of the ecosystem that you really need to be leveraging if you're not already in Israel. So we've not left Ben Gurion yet. We have top hospitals here. Sheba's amazing, right? Sheba's a top 10 global hospitals. We have many top hospitals here. We have Clalit and Maccabi, right? Who have amazing amounts of data, which is integrated. Most of the US system is not integrated data. I grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee. And so when I go back home, my parents live in Nashville now, and I go to these medical device and digital health conferences in Nashville, which, by the way, if you're not familiar with Nashville on your map, has about 50% of the healthcare corporates in the US are based in Nashville, Tennessee, okay? And when I go to Nashville, they spend most of the presentation talking about how good they are gathering the right data that they need to test their idea or somebody else's idea. That's actually their business, is gathering the right data in order to then maybe do something with it. That's where we started here. That's a huge advantage. They literally talk about taking 6 months to a year just to gather the data to begin doing the research. So we have to understand that's a very special thing we have here. The counter side of it is that our system here, it's not perfect, but it happens to actually work quite well, is not the system that exists in most of the rest of the world. There are similar aspects to it. There are ACOs in America, there's the Kaiser Permanentes, right? But most of the US healthcare system is not integrated. The payer is theoretically supposed to be working with the healthcare provider, but really they're antagonistic to each other. And of course, all of those reasons are the reasons that the multinationals are increasingly active here in the ecosystem. So if you haven't started already, even if you don't have a product, even if you don't have any kind of testing, any kind of numbers to validate your idea, you should be going out there and trying to borrow some time from the folks who are visiting or that are setting up shop here in Israel and saying, hey, I have an idea. Let's just assume for a second. Let's be really creative and assume that it's going to work from a technological point of view. Okay, just give me the benefit of the doubt. It's going to work. This crazy idea is going to work. How would you use it? Right, so with BIPs, so one of our clients is Boehringer Ingelheim. It's a big German pharma company. So they've got an up and rising blockbuster called Jardiance. So it's a diabetes drug, and one of the other indications that it's approved for is CHF, right? Chronic heart failure. So their drug works. So why would they be interested in something like that? Why would they be interested in something like that?
You want to make sure that it affects the patient. See the vital signs, how it affects his.
So you're not wrong, but we need to dig deeper. Where's the real value? The real value for a CHF patient is preventing deterioration. Now, as opposed to other conditions, CHF happens to deteriorate very slowly over the course of 2 weeks. So there's many different kinds of vital signs you can monitor and successfully know if there's pulmonary edema, if there's liquid building up in the lungs. And if you know that, you can get the patient into the hospital and deal with it. And if you don't, the patient's going to end up in the ER, and they're going to end up in the ER multiple times per year, right? So that is a huge opportunity. But if you should know that up front. You should be designing your clinical trials up front, knowing, hey, that's a great target market for you. It may or may not work, I don't know. But that could be a great target market for you, right? Now, for the folks in this room, you guys are all very familiar with the various startups in the room. There's many different maps like this out there. I just wanted to point out that there really is so many different parts of the ecosystem being addressed. So wherever you feel like you are, you're probably, almost certainly, not the only one doing it. Now, you may consider the others in your box competitors. They may be. I would challenge you to find a way to be friends and find a way to bounce ideas off each other. Because most likely, you're really not competing against each other, you're competing against the rest of the world. And you could probably benefit a lot from understanding each other's strengths and weaknesses. So let's talk about business models really now. So these are just 5 companies, and we put this together actually a couple months ago, and Healthy IO was over there. Actually, we tried to get David to bring them up here. Apparently they were busy raising $60 million, so I can't blame them. But all these companies, on one hand, have technologies that work, I assume, because of where they're at in their stage. And second of all, they're not to be taken for advantage just superficially what they do. So let's just go from the top. TaylorMade, a company that really I would never have thought would succeed in Israel. They're dealing with billing. They're dealing with billing in a US healthcare system, which is nothing like our health system here, from a billing point of view, right? And they are dealing specifically with costs of cancer treatment. Cancer obviously is a major, major area, no matter which vertical in the healthcare system you're involved in. It's a major moneymaker. What they understood is, actually, if you're a hospital, you lose millions, tens of millions of dollars on treating cancer patients who die. Okay, cancer patients unfortunately pass on. And what happens if they don't have any money saved to pay their bills? Nothing. You don't get paid, right? And so suddenly they recognize that there's an opportunity there. Maybe if the stakeholder, not just the patient who wants the best care, that's clear. Everybody needs to be taking care of the patients. But the other stakeholder, so that's the hospital here, and the insurance company. Maybe there's a way to coordinate the patient's care in a way where you're going to bring down costs, where you're going to improve the patient's lives. And do you know, there is something that patients are more afraid of than cancer in America. Does anybody know what that is? Paying their bill. Right? Legit. Patients are more afraid of the bill than the cancer. So what an amazing asset, what an amazing company, which, by the way, raised, I think, $7+ million coming out of Sonara Ventures. Medial is a company that's been around for ages, and we have to give them credit for sticking around, right? So part of the challenge often is not just having the data to prove whoever wants to listen that you work and that you're meaningful, but it takes time to implement. And they've taken that time and they've gotten more and more implementation. So what are they doing? So one of their first indications is dealing with a situation which is unique here in Israel. In the rest of the world, certainly in America, if you have colorectal cancer screening, it's actually approved basically for all patients over the age of 50. In Israel, that's not the case. Here you have to have a referral. Did you know that? So here we have a unique situation where everybody's not being screened because we're saving money, we're an efficient system, okay? But that means that more patients are at risk. So they took the unique situation that we're at here in Israel, and they recognized that there's an American issue, and actually it's a global issue. Even though screening is approved, screening is a nice way of saying a colonoscopy. It's not fun, it's not pleasant. You have to fast, you have to endure pain. Nobody wants to do it, and 50% of patients don't do it. So doctor prescribes it, patient doesn't come in. It's not a question of payment, it's just not gonna happen. So suddenly this technology, which has a unique role in the Israeli ecosystem, can address stakeholder issues in the US system. But you have to understand, it's a different niche, right? It's not the same way, it's not being used in the same way that it's being used here. It's clearly not anything as close to effective as a colonoscopy. That's much better. What if the patient's just not gonna do it? Happens to be just yesterday, there's another company in that same space in America called Exact Sciences, which has a stool test for also colorectal cancer, and they got questioned for the value that they have. They happen to have a very expensive test, over $4,000, approved by 90% plus of payers. Right? It happens to be they're a very innovative company. They've got partnerships with pharma, they've got partnerships with Epic, right? But Medicare said, hey guys, what's your value? And they're on the hot seat right now, and it's a public company, so they've got to fight hard for that. But Medial has taken the time and addressed the right needs within their payer markets. We could go down this list, and I won't harbor too much. Healthy IO I'll just touch on since it's been in the news now. What do they have? They've basically taken a technology which is not so wow. They've repackaged a urine test using chemical color coding into a snazzy product that they can sell, and they've gotten a couple FDA approvals now. And you can use your smartphone, though, to better understand what all those colors mean. right? Because in America, they don't actually trust us to remember our PIN on our Visa cards. You know how in Israel we all have PINs? In America, they don't think that we can remember them. So we're probably not that good at doing colors, apparently, as well. So they've taken care of it. So you just take a picture. That picture tells you, oh, wow, okay, here's what's going on. But who needs such a thing? Who needs a urine test? Is that like an exciting product? Personally, I don't think back in like drug testing, like high school days, okay, so I think that was probably like the last time that I took a urine test. Okay, who needs a urine test? Pregnant woman. Whoa. Okay. CHF patients. Okay. What else? Kidney patients. There's a lot of people, chronic patients, and pregnant women are not chronic, but for 9 months they are. Okay. So there's a real market there, right? If you understand who that market is. But just by putting out in this, in the Walgreens shelf, it's one of thousands of items there. Is that really that exciting? Probably not.
Everybody needs a urine test. So why are you looking for a specific target? Everybody.
Because you're a startup. You can't wait for everybody to come. You need somebody to come. If you wait for everybody to come, you're probably going to run out of money. You need somebody to come. So who's your somebody? Who's your target audience today, tomorrow? Who can you afford to wait around for? Who can you spend your time convincing? Because if you wait for everybody to come because you have something that's great for everybody, you're probably going to run out of money. Right? So you need to focus on who can you really handle today? Who's the sales cycle? Dangerous word. We're not used to sales cycles in this room, okay? Sales are like for the guy that buys us, right? Not anymore. Digital health is about actually selling. You've got to figure out what the sales cycle is for your product. And if you have a realistic sales cycle, investors are probably going to be more realistically excited about you. And if you don't, keep looking. So what's going on here? So this is the Medicare push for interoperability. Again, something we don't know of here in Israel. Okay, thankfully, we dealt with interoperability literally 15 years ago. The system in Israel that links our hospitals to our healthcare practitioners to the pharmacies. Anybody know what it's called? What is it called in Israel?
OFEC.
It's called OFEC, after Ziv OFEC. Okay, so we have a legend in Israel who not only fixed it for us here, thank you very much, Ziv, but he also basically started and fixed it, technically speaking, for the rest of the world. So there's been interoperability fixed on the market for 15 years now. So how come there's still not interoperability in America? Right? I thought we fixed it already. No? What happened? So the answer is it's not a technical issue, it's a business issue, right? So we can say, oh, it's privacy, or we don't know patient IDs, there's no central patient ID. I can make up the good excuses too, but the reality is, the real reason is it's not in the current stakeholders' interest to share that data. That's over, game over. This last year, the HIMSS conference, February 2019, this changes the situation in the room today, because Medicare came out and said enough's enough. We're going to be forcing interoperability. If you want to get paid by Medicare, which is not the majority of payment in America, but happens to be about 25%, and it's by far the biggest payer. So if you want to get paid by Medicare, you have to become interoperable. Whether you're an insurer, whether you're a hospital, whether you're a digital healthcare company. If the patient wants their data and they ask you for it, you're breaking the law if you don't give it to them. That's whoa. And so this is actually from the Center for Medicare. This is their own chart, which looks really simple, right? About how to share all that really simple to share data. We're talking about monitoring only because it happens to be in Israel, something like 20%, if not more, of the companies are some sort of wearable monitor, right? So this is actually a small trend in the global digital health space. Probably it's about 5-10 years old, frankly, is gathering the data. Gathering the data is old school. Okay, we can all get the data. There's a lot of different sensors. Literally here, this is just a small list of all the different types of vital signs that you can gather, and probably just in Israel, you can gather each one of these in at least 5 different ways with different startups. No joke. So the question is fine, so you can gather the data. That doesn't seem to be what's stopping the growth here. You got the data, so what? Okay, so you got the data. You've got the data. Next. What sets you apart from the other 5? And again, they're not your competition, they should be your friends. Okay? So what sets you apart from the rest of what's business as usual in America? And that's where there's room for real creativity. So this we have to be a little bit creative. So this is actually something that we share with our clients who are multinationals, as I mentioned, talking about what they should be doing in Israel. Okay? What they should be doing in Israel is looking for collaborations. They want to be piloting things, they want to be partnering, they want to be maybe co-developing if they're like really excited, right? Hopefully investing. Somebody needs to pay the bills, right? So fine, so that's obvious in some ways. But then the second question is, well, so why here? They're not here for the 8.5 million Israelis. We're not a market, right? So they didn't come here to to take over the Israeli market. Anthem, don't worry, they're not about to put Khalid to shame. I don't think they're that interested, right? But they're here because they understand. And if we go back to that map chart, there's actually a quote there from the Cleveland Clinic guys. And they've been here for almost the longest. And they say that the reason that they're in Israel isn't because every investment here has been a huge success. Unfortunately, it hasn't. So why are they here? Because they say, and they're good, they scout all over the world. It's not just Cleveland and Israel. They literally scout all over the world for technologies to bring back to the Cleveland Clinic, to co-develop, to collaborate with, to invest in, and to scale up, right? So why are they here? They're still here, right? It wasn't like a passing fade, right? Now they're part of eHealth Ventures, they're partners with Maccabi, they're here. So why are they here? They're here, they say, because they found the trends that they see in Israel are about 5 to 10 years ahead of what they see in America. They would love for everything they touch here to be gold. Really, they would love it. But that's probably not the reality. But if they can at least try to succeed together, even if it fails, for them, that's okay. Right? What do they say in Las Vegas? The house always wins. Right? So they're the house. Any strategic partner is the house. They may, in good faith, really want to succeed with you. Okay? But you know your own chances of success. Right? So the reality is there's pretty cool opportunities here in Israel, and they're pretty excited about that. But what you should be thinking of as a startup is, what can set me aside from everything else they're looking at? Not in Israel, globally. Right? What makes me and the opportunities in my team, and the technologies and the data I have access to, and the business model that I'm bringing to the table? Because I can't tell you how many different wearables I've seen. Okay? And I think we got about 2 pilots coming up right now with 2 different wearables. Okay, it'll be the first time. Okay, I have to tell you, unfortunately and honestly, is the challenge of wearables is scale up. Look at the Apple Watch, look at Fitbit. They all work brilliantly. They're all FDA approved for what they're approved for. So what's the issue? Are patients actually wearing it after the clinical trial? So clinical trial tech is, by the way, a great area. If you're not looking that way, you should. Okay, but beyond the clinical trial, are they actually wearing them? Are they adhering to these remote monitoring? And the answer is, overwhelmingly, it's a major, major area. It's of issue, right? So if you're developing a remote monitor, you should be thinking and trying to answer, what are the niches I can target where I can avoid answering that question? Because we're all human. We're all the Apple Watch has to be charged almost every day, right? So even if you want to be wearing, you can be wearing a dead Apple Watch. That doesn't help. And while we are talking about digital, we have to talk about piloting, right? So everybody in this room, if you're not waiting to be FDA approved, or even if you are, you're probably offering something that you can offer pre-FDA approval, right? That's you should be thinking about that. What can I offer which isn't gold, but it's at least silver? At least I can give it away for free. If you can think of something that's worth giving away for free, then you can get more data, you can get more relationships, you can build rapport with real potential partners. You can come back to investors and say, hey, look what I did successfully. We said that we're going to use my monitor, we said that we're going to use this data gathering to deliver more efficient, more effective care, right? So figure out what that niche is and do it. Find the Cleveland Clinic, find the pharma company, find the medical device company, partner with them, even if it's not your target indication, so you can get real relationships, real data, and real proof that you as a manager are worth it. Because really that's the biggest thing that anybody's betting on in this room. When any investor decides to put money on the table, they're betting on you. Even if the technology goes to the chute, okay? Even if the clinical trials fails, they want to know that you have a backup. There's a pivot here. Right? Look at ReallySense. They're not a digital healthcare company, right? They're around for 15 years. There's not been digital health for 15 years, right? But they're actually one of the largest in terms of manpower, I think in terms of investment as well, digital healthcare companies as well. It's a medical device company. It's a remote monitor, right? So these are all issues that I got these numbers from Accenture actually. I'm getting called out here, so we'll figure out what they were supposed to mean. So what I understood, and it's definitely, it's lower, okay. So fine, so I'm not that worried, unfortunately. So the reality is, there's a lot of pilots out there, and this number of 25% is meant to, is it up here or take off in the end? Yeah, there it is. Okay, so it's referring not to things that failed to work. We are only including in the statistics technologies that met their KPIs, that met their goals. It works, according to the definition of both sides. So then why are less than 25% being scaled up? It's not the technology.
We call it death after the pilot.
Death after the pilot, death by pilot, death. I don't care what caused it, death. Okay? So what's going on? It's not the technology, right? We're talking about business models. It's about business models, and it's about relationships, and it's about aligning stakeholders, right? So look at us. So for us, our target client as a consulting group is usually the innovation arm of a large multinational or hospital or insurance, right? But guess what? They don't own any P&L, right? They've got maybe a handful of millions, maybe tens of millions of dollars. That's not bad. That's a real budget, okay? But that's what they have. That's their P&L. So the real decision maker is always going to be the head of a business unit, the head of a therapeutic area. You've got to make sure that they're convinced. But imagine the conversation of, hey, I'm going to increase, let's say, adherence of a drug 10, 15%. That's really meaningful, by the way. Okay? You can increase adherence, i.e., they're going to make 10, 15% more on a already approved, already profitable drug that's already in the market. That sounds great. Okay? So if you've got one of those, if you can do that, please come talk to me, okay? That's interesting. Okay, so if you can improve adherence by 10, 15%, imagine having now suddenly the conversation with the head of the therapeutic area of a very expensive drug. How does that drug get in the hands of the patients? At least in America, there's a very expensive salesperson, probably the best salespeople in the world. They're smart, they're good looking, they're very knowledgeable in healthcare, right? And they know how to sell. So these salespeople are expensive. And when they come to a doctor, they need to deliver results. So those results cost that 5 minutes of lunch, whatever. And suddenly, if you can imagine going to that salesperson's boss and saying, hey, I need like just 2 minutes of their time because I want to sell them this app and monitor that's going to increase 10, 15% of adherence. Do you know what that head of that therapeutic area is going to say? Get out of here. Okay? You're wasting my time. Do you know what those 2 minutes are worth? That's half the time that my salespeople get with a doctor. So you have to think about how you can align with all these different stakeholders, hopefully multiple of them at once. So take a look there at the report. We're happy to share our thoughts, give you hopefully constructive feedback if we can, and good luck to us all.
We're not allowing you questions because Ilya is joining us on the panel, so you can answer in that context.